Hello and welcome to the News by Standards. King Charles says the people of Ukraine have suffered unimaginably in a message marking the first anniversary of Russia's invasion. He also praised the remarkable courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people after thousands have been killed and injured in the conflict. A minute's silence was held in the UK at 11 a.m. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will also urge allies to move faster in arming Ukraine at a meeting of the G7 later. Ukrainian troops who are being trained in the UK took part in the minute's silence outside number 10 Downing Street. Mr. Sunak, who was also joined by his wife Akshata Murthy and Kiev's ambassador to Britain, Vadim Pristatko, after the moment of commemoration, the Ukrainian national anthem was sung. In his message, King Charles said it has now been a full year that the people of Ukraine have suffered unimaginably from an unprovoked full-scale attack on their nation. They have shown truly remarkable courage and resilience in the face of such human tragedy. The world has watched in horror at all the unnecessary suffering inflicted upon Ukrainians, many of whom I have and indeed across the world from Romania to Canada. King Charles, who met Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky at Buckingham Palace this month, added, "I can only hope the outpouring of solidarity from across the globe may bring not only practical aid, but also strengthen from the knowledge that together we stand united." At a vigil on Thursday evening, a crowd listened to an emotional reading of the Ukrainian poem Take Only What Is Most Important by actress Dame Helen Mirren, who was visibly moved to tears, and Defence Ministry Secretary Ben Wallace paid tribute to Ukrainian soldiers as the bravest of the brave. The conflict, which began when Russia invaded on the 24th of February 2022, has seen at least 100,000 of each side's soldiers killed or injured, according to the US military. Thousands of civilians have also died, with more than 13 million people made refugees or displaced within Ukraine. Rita and her 4 children were among those who fled in the early stages of the conflict. They are now living in the UK with Rita's British partner Andy. She told BBC Two's Newsnight programme she would never forget the horrible sound, that panic, that fear, when Russian troops invaded. Rita said her heart was aching after witnessing how parts of Ukraine had changed after 12 months of conflict. "The country is in pain," she said. "I know how my country is and how it can be. I know how beautiful it is. Now it's different, but it can come back to that beautiful place. I can see summertime. It is going to be warm. It's going to be green. That's how I see Ukraine. With lots of green trees, with lots of flowers, with lots of smiles on people's faces, and with tears from happiness." The Archbishop of Canterbury called for peace between Russia and Ukraine as he reflected on the anniversary. Speaking on BBC Radio 4's Thought of the Day segment, Justin Welby said there must be a future with a just and stable peace, a free and secure Ukraine, and the beginning of a generations-long process of healing and reconciliation. British Ambassador to Ukraine Dame Melinda Simmons has recalled how the outbreak of the war last February was such a traumatic time for her and our colleagues due to the uncertainty of what was ahead. She went on to describe how her role became different, saying it stopped being a job and became a life because war isn't just a 5-day thing. Dame Melinda told BBC Radio 4's Women Hour programme, "We often talk about how sirens can make your hand shake, heart beat faster, even sounds that aren't sounds like motorbikes on the road can make you start. But none of us talk about it as an active fear. We factor it in our daily lives and work and are deliberate in keeping calm and carrying on." Meanwhile, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office has announced fresh export bans on goods that could be used by the Russian military. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly said sanctions have been extended to more products, including aircraft parts, radio equipment and electronic components. Senior executives at the Russian state-owned nuclear power company Rosatom, as well as bosses at Russia's 2 largest defense companies and 4 banks, will also face sanctions. Ukraine has been urging its Western backers to increase support as Russia mobilizes ahead of an unexpected spring offensive. During a recent tour of Europe, President Zelensky increased his calls for Western nations to supply modern fighter jets. The UK is to start training Ukrainian forces to fly NATO standard aircraft, but like other Western nations, it has so far not supplied jets, saying it remains a long-term option. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said the UK would be very happy to supply fighter jets to Eastern Europe allies so they can release their Soviet-era planes to Ukraine. He said they were already being used by Kiev and it would be a faster way of boosting Ukraine's defences than supplying British Typhoons. He told BBC Radio 4's Today programme, "That is definitely on offer, let's put it that way. If a country approaches us and says they would like us to do that, then the UK would be very happy to either backfill or indeed cover with things like extra deployment of our aircraft to cover for policing and extra protection. That's already been happening for the last 8 or 9 months in other countries across Europe," Mr. Wallace added. During a virtual meeting of leaders from the G7 group of advanced economies, Mr. Sunak is expected to say an acceleration in support for Ukraine is what it will take to shift Putin's mindset. "This must be our priority now," he will add. "Instead of an incremental approach, we need to move faster on artillery, armour and air defence." He is expected to make the argument for supplying Ukraine with longer-term ranged weapons to disrupt Russia's ability to target Ukraine's Ukraine's infrastructure, something to which he committed the UK earlier this month. Other senior UK politicians have sent messages to Ukraine on the anniversary of the war. Labour's Sir Keir Starmer called for the UK to double down on support for Ukraine. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was in office when Russia invaded, repeated his call to give Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky weapons to finish the job. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey paid tribute to the amazing acts of heroism in Ukraine and said the UK would stand in solidarity with Ukraine until they achieve victory. SNP leader and Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon wished a speedy victory for Ukraine in a letter to Ukrainians in Scotland to mark the anniversary. Although support for Ukraine has united the UK's main political parties, the Prime Minister has faced pressure from some of his own Conservative MPs to supply fighter planes as soon as possible.